Hello everyone and welcome to the video for Chapter 7, Creating a Flexible Organization. In the last chapter, Chapter 6, we talked about management generally, sort of defined what that means. In this chapter, we're going to talk about what it means to be flexible, to have an organization that is able to adjust to its needs. And that's what we mean by a flexible organization. This is also in the management discipline, which we discussed last time as well. Okay, so we're going to start talking about what we mean by the term organization. So this is a little bit different than a company necessarily, because you can have an organization can be something that it's a broader definition. We're going to look at how within an organization we specialize. People specialize in their jobs. How do you go about the business of breaking an organization into departments? Even if that's necessary. How do you decentralize and delegate? We're going to look at what we mean by this term span of management. What is management involved with? We're going to look at different ways companies are organized, how they're structured, how we use committees, how we use informal organizations. This is sort of like how a company or even an organization within a company organizes itself, because remember, the second box in the management process is organizing, and that's what this is about, is how do you organize the organization to do what it needs to do to meet the strategic objectives. Okay, so before we do that, let's look at Coca-Cola. This is a brief case about a reorganization. Now, this happens all the time in corporate America, and I think it's kind of funny sometimes, because whenever there's a new CEO comes in, they'll often look at the organization and reorganize it. And I've been through this enough times over the years. The one company I worked for the longest time, Ames Financial Corporation, I worked there for 5 years. And in the 5 years we were there, we had 4 CEOs. And each CEO that came in, the first thing they did they said, well, the reason this company hasn't been successful up to this point is because it's not organized correctly, and we're going to reorganize it. And what was funny was they would often just they would just reset the way it was before. So the first CEO organized the sales around customers, and then the second one said, no, let's organize it around types of products. And then the new one comes in and says, no, that's too inefficient. Let's organize around customers. And the next one comes in and says, let's organize around products. So they constantly reorganize and reset the way that they've done it before. But the basics idea behind reorganization is, how is the company addressing its needs? And so sometimes, like in this example I gave, when you're organized around products, so let's say you organize your sales staff around products, but you have customers that buy multiple products from you. So then a customer in that case, if that's the situation, it could be visited from multiple salespeople from the same company who are selling different products, because it's organized around products. Well, the customer might think, I'd rather just have one person I can talk to from this company who can sell me all the products. And so that's an example of how you might say, well, let's reorganize this business around customers or products and so on. And that's why that happens. So in this case, read the case about Coca-Cola and think about whether this reorganization was even necessary. And if so, do you think it achieved what it was trying to achieve, or do you think it will achieve what it was trying to achieve? And then, of course, like we do for all these companies, I have posted here the link to the stock, so you can always look up Coca-Cola's stock. In fact, let's just do that and see if I can do this on my screen here. I'm working with 2 screens, so I have to, oops, that is not what I meant to do. Okay, hold on. Let me go back. Previous. Okay, here we go. So let's look here at Coca-Cola, and just to get an example, so this, they're worth $237 billion. This company's been around for a really long time, and it makes a lot of money. So, but it goes through phases where its product is less trendy. So like a few years ago or a couple decades ago, like Gatorade everyone wanted Gatorade. No one was drinking soda. They all wanted energy drinks or whatever it is, sports drinks. And so what these companies do, Coke and Pepsi both do this, is they go buy a competitor in a new product area so that they can gain the market share. These businesses, Coke and Pepsi in particular, I have a friend who used to work for Pepsi, and they live and die off tiny, tiny little differences in market share. So when you go to the grocery store and you see Coke is on the end cap, but Pepsi is not, Coke is paying to be there because they're trying to get a little bit more of the share of the soda market than or the cola market, so on. So it's fought over tiny, tiny little differences, and in part that's because people drink less cola than they used to, so the market is shrinking, and so they have to fight in order to keep their profits up. They have to fight for market share. Well, this is something we'll talk about later in the class, market share and so on. But anyway, for this purpose, look at this company's reorganization and think about, well, did this make sense given what they were trying to achieve? Okay, so what do we mean by an organization? As I mentioned earlier, an organization does not necessarily have to be a company. An organization can be within a company, or you could refer to the entire company as an organization. So both are true. So a large company is an organization, but within that company, you have the larger it is, the more organizations you have within that larger organization. So you can see that here because organization is defined as just a group of two or more people working together. So you could have hundreds, thousands of organizations in a large company. So when I worked at PayPal, I worked for a lawyer who was in charge of integrating companies that PayPal bought. So she worked inside of she had an organization herself, mergers and acquisitions integrations. That was the team I was on, the organization I was part of. But that organization was part of a larger organization within the legal department, which was then part of the legal department, which was then part of the company. So in a very large organization like that, you'll have multiple levels of organizations just within one of these boxes here that you see on this org chart, this sample org chart on the left. And really all an org chart does is diagrams this organization. So, they're done different ways, but the most common way you'll see is an org chart defines who reports to whom. So in my case, I reported to the lawyer who is in charge of M&A integrations. She reported to somebody to another lawyer who was in charge of that sub-organization, and then he reported to the general counsel. The general counsel reported to the president. The president reports to the board. So that was that reporting structure. Now, in an organization like my company, my law practice doesn't even meet the definition of an organization, because even though it's a legal entity, it's a corporation just like PayPal is. There's only one person. It's just me. And so there's not two or more. So I don't in a sole proprietorship or even just a single member LLC or a single shareholder corporation, it's actually doesn't even meet the definition of an organization. Now that being said, there's still a lot of management that goes on in a single person organization. Well, I shouldn't use that word because it doesn't meet the definition of organization. But in a single member, single person firm, there's still all the management functions, but you don't have the organizational functions because you're not trying to deal with relationships among people. And all the chain of command refers to is that this sort of what I was just describing in the legal department at PayPal. Eventually, I report to someone, that person reports to someone, that person reports to someone. And so, we're in this chain of command of authority inside of the organization. Really big organizations have to do it that way because there's just too much going on for any one person to be totally involved with. So these functions are delegated down through this organization. Okay, job specialization. So the larger the company is, the larger the organization is, the more specialization is typically necessary. So again, going back to my experience at PayPal, in that case, I was just working on the legal matters associated with integrating a company that PayPal purchased. That's all I did. I didn't do anything else besides that. Now, in my law practice, where I'm by myself, I have to do everything. I have to do the accounting. I have to take out the trash in my office. I have to fix my computers when they break. I have to do everything associated with that. So the smaller the organization, the less specialization there is. The larger the organization, the more specialized it gets. And using the law again as an example, this is the reason that law firms exist, because large law firms, there are some law firms that have like, thousands of lawyers, and they operate worldwide, and they will have practice areas based on, they have a bankruptcy practice and a corporate practice, and litigation practice, and they'll have lawyers that specialize in very, very, limited areas and just do that all day long, but they're the preeminent specialists in that area. So if you're a client who has an issue, a legal issue, and you need that sort of help, you go to the person who specializes in it, and you pay for the use of it, but you don't need them all the time. So you just pay to use that specialization. And that's exactly what happens in larger firms. You specialize in an area, and then that becomes a competitive advantage that you can offer on behalf of your clients. So, and as it notes here, when you're specialized, it's easier, but at least in theory, easier to train and hire people who are specialists in that area. When you're a smaller organization and you need someone who has the skill set to manage a whole bunch of different things, that's a little bit harder to find, and it's harder to train because you have to train somebody to do all these different functions. It's one of the reasons why I've never hired anybody in my law practice. It would take me so much time to train someone to do all this stuff that I can just do myself much more quickly and efficiently. Okay, so this is kind of something I mentioned earlier when we talked about the reorganization. Like, how do you organize around something? Do you organize by function, by product, by location, by customer? And you can see sort of the various advantages and disadvantages here. There's no one right answer on this, as is most often the case in management, the management function. And it may even be different within a company. So it could very well be that one part of a company, it makes sense to organize by function, or another by customer. And really, at the end of the day, it depends on what's the best. Remember back to the last chapter. What is the best way to use the company's resources the most efficiently to achieve the output that it's required to achieve? And so a good management will identify the best type of departmentalization that will be the most effective for a given situation. And again, there's no one right or wrong answer. Okay, so delegation. So delegation is something that's important both from a management and from a legal perspective. So remember the structure. Shareholders elect directors to represent them. Directors hire managers to operate the firm. But when a manager is operating the firm, they are doing so under a delegation of authority. So the authority to, let's say, to invest money, for example, to build a factory or whatever it is the company's doing, the real authority to do that belongs to the board. The board delegates that authority to the officers who act on behalf of the company. So delegation is this idea that somewhere there is this power, the source of power and authority. And from a legal perspective, in a corporate environment, that's always the board. It's always the board. And this is even true in a nonprofit. It's the board of a nonprofit who has the responsibility to take the donations and deploy them effectively. In fact, I just in a week or so, I'm going to give a presentation to an organization that's just starting a new nonprofit. And I'm going to explain, my purpose is to explain to them, this is what your job is now. This is your legal responsibility. So the board's job is to delegate responsibility and then oversee it. And then that happens all through that chain of command. Senior management delegates authority. to someone below them and then oversees it, but is ultimately responsible. So even delegation does not mean always that you are delegating responsibility. Usually the person delegating retains the responsibility for whatever it is they're doing, but actually has somebody else help them to do it. And sometimes this delegation of responsibility also includes a delegation of authority. So the way to think about this, an example for this would be like signing authority. So if you're the CEO, you can sign a check to spend however much money the company has. The person underneath the CEO has delegated some responsibility and has some authority, can spend a certain amount of money up to a certain level, and to go above that has to go to the CEO. And then the next level down in the chain of command has some sub authority under that. So by the time you get down to the lowest level employees that may have no authority to spend any money, or might be the authority to spend a little bit of money or to enter into a contract, a specific type of contract. But that's all because that authority has been delegated. It all resides with the board. And the board delegates and authorizes the officers, and those officers delegate and authorize below them. And their job is to manage this process and make sure that the resources are being used effectively, efficiently, and legally. Okay, so what do we mean by the span of management? So a span means like how many people report to one other person. And what you'll find in some organizations is what we would call a wide span, or this is also called a flat organization. So in a flat organization, you have one person who has a lot of people who report to them. In a narrow span organization, you take these boxes, as you can see in these two diagrams, and you create this middle layer. And so that the person in the top box there on the right is only managing 2 people instead of 6, and those 2 people are managing 2 others. So that's what we call a taller organization. And what happens sometimes is if you're too flat of an organization, the manager can't effectively manage. It just becomes the span becomes too wide. It becomes too hard to manage. So what happens is the manager then they delegate authority and narrow the span, or increase its size, its height, so that each manager then is managing a smaller amount of work, or a more concise chunk of work, and then that allows for, at least in theory, for more more direct management of underneath that chain. But it also means that if you look in the tall organization on the right, the boxes on the bottom are further separated from the box on the top. So some organizations don't like this because it means you basically have to go through someone to get to that next level. And this can sometimes result in kind of siloing, where the managers don't want the people below them to go to their boss, and they want to keep everything under control. So there are pros and cons to these two structures. Okay, so what are different organizational structures? 4 forms of organizational structures. So one would be a line structure, where you have this organization that goes through a chain of command, and a straight line is drawn down through this chain of command. And so you start at the top, and you have this line through the chain. Now, a line and staff structure is where you have these middle level managers that allow for some distribution of management span. There's matrix organizations where you have these kind of the mixture, and you have vertical and horizontal reporting lines. Some of these organizational charts, like the one I showed you earlier, can get incredibly complicated. There's those like software programs designed to create these things that have dotted lines all over the place. And I had this once at a job I had. So if you think about the chain, there was the board. The board had the CEO. The CEO, the general counsel reported the CEO. And when I started, I reported the general counsel, but the company got bigger, and so the general counsel wanted to narrow the span. He had too many lawyers reporting to him, so he created these sub channels, and then I was underneath another manager, and I reported to her. She reported to the general counsel, and so on. But I serviced a business unit that had its own president. So sometimes these really large companies, there'll be a president of the company, but then there'll be a president of a division, and that's what was the case here. And my job was to be the lawyer for that division. So I was actually the general counsel of that division, and I had a dotted line over to him. So, and he was senior in management to my actual direct boss. So what would happen sometimes is if I didn't like the answer I got from my direct boss, I'd just go around her and go to the person who I worked with, and he would, he had more power than she did. So, that's one of the problems of a matrix organization. Um, and then a virtual structure, I don't really see this that often, but this is just kind of where you go away from a lot of that rigid command line stuff, and you just have sort of contract out all these functions, and you just hire outside companies to do it, and you just have fewer people and fewer managers inside the company. This is kind of something that is trendy. I've seen it come and go over 30 years. For a while, outsourcing was all the rage, and these companies, they outsourced payroll, they outsourced legal, they outsourced human resources to these firms, and that was trendy for a while. And then there were some problems with it. So then, the next round of managers came in and said, yeah, we're going to bring this stuff in house so we have more control over it, and then goes through another cycle of outsourcing. So this is something I think over time you see in management these trends evolve, and this is one of those where it comes and goes fairly frequently. So I think with all the technology now, there's a lot more outsourcing. Like a lot of companies don't even have payroll clerks anymore. They used to have whole departments that did nothing but calculate people's paychecks, and there's software programs that do that now. So some of these functions have been outsourced where the technology provides for it, but again, it kind of ebbs and flows with technology and trends in management. Okay, examine the types, development, and uses of teams. Okay, so teams is one of the, you're working in a team and you're in class, and you'll see a lot of that in the School of Business. If you're if you major in business, you'll be working in teams in almost every class. And this similar to what I was just talking about with trendiness. Sometimes this team structure goes through trends. I've seen it come and go over the years. But one of the ideas is you assign a task to a team of people instead of to just one person, and have them solve the problems or pursue the opportunity as a team. There's disadvantages and advantages with this. Teams are not always, they don't always get along. They don't always operate efficiently. Sometimes it's more efficient just to have one person just do it, or be in charge and direct other people with what to do. It really depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Team functionality doesn't always work for certain types of problems, but there are many examples in the literature about teams finding solutions to problems because they interact with each other and able to work together. So it really depends on the organization, the culture, and the type of problem that is being solved. This at the bottom, you'll see this a lot in the management discipline: the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. This is the kind of the life cycle of a team, where it comes to life, it forms, then in its early phases, it's a little more volatile. It's trying to develop how it's going to operate. Then it stabilizes, kind of does what it's supposed to do. It performs, and then eventually it winds down. This is kind of a common management concept. Okay, committees and task forces. So this is something we do a lot of at PLU, and it's very common in the education space. So I'm on all kinds of committees at the university. We tend to do things by committee. The idea at a place like PLU is that the faculty have some agency, some authority inside the organization. And so in order to operate, to be in charge of some of the functions, it does this by committee. So, for example, the idea of creating a new class or a new major, we don't have, that is not just one person doing that, or it's not just the the administration saying, we're going to create this major. It's a group of faculty evaluating the opportunity, deciding how to do it, taking it to the faculty for a vote, and so on. And these are sometimes effective ways to do things, but I'll tell you, they are not efficient. And you can see this in the disadvantages side. It takes much longer to make decisions this way when you need to build consensus among a group, among a team, than it is for somebody to just be delegated the authority and make a decision. And so that's, that's kind of one of the problems with the task force structure. You don't see it as often in the corporate world for that reason, because it's less efficient. It's just corporations tend to be on a much faster, much more resource focused path, and so they tend to try to do things the most efficient way, and that's very often sort of a line control management structure. But if you want to give the most number of people the most amount of power within an organization, you typically have to do it through things like committees and task forces and stuff, and allow consensus building among a larger group of people who are sort of equal. So like in the university example, faculty are all kind of the same. We all sort of have we have the power in the institution as a body, as a group of faculty. So it's not like there aren't senior faculty who tell junior faculty what to do and junior faculty who tell even more junior faculty. It doesn't work like that, like it does in a corporation. It's all the faculty work together on a certain set of issues that we're responsible for. So we have to organize ourselves this way, as opposed to a command and control structure. All right, so the different functions of an informal organization. So what do we mean by an informal organization? So informal organizations exist even inside of regular organizations. This is just groups of people who together communicate and sometimes work, cause problems even, or solve them. But you see this all the time in organizations where, you don't necessarily have a reporting relationship. You're not necessarily in the same department, but you work together, to solve problems. And I used to do this all the time. And this actually, it's a very important skill set to have. Sometimes you have to go to someone who's in another organization and convince them to help you, even though they have no incentive, they have no built-in incentive to do so. And so sometimes the informal skill set, we looked at skill sets that managers have to have, being able to communicate with and advocate for something you need done is an important aspect of getting your job done, even though it's not your responsibility. So, for example, in the PayPal, since I brought that up several times, we're trying to integrate a company. I need the accounting department to tell me how the accounting is going to work before I can draft the agreement that describes it. Well, they've got other things to do. They're not assigned to me. They don't report to me. I don't have any authority over them. In fact, in that case, I was just a contractor at PayPal. I just worked when they needed help. So I wasn't even an employee of PayPal. So, these people had no incentive at all to help me. So I had to go to them, advocate, explain to them why I needed it, advocate for it. If I didn't get cooperation, I'd have to go find someone who had authority to direct them to take this action. That's what we mean by informal and relationship based. And I would say in some ways this is almost as important sometimes, depending on the situation, as formal structure, delegation, power, and authority. Okay, last is our case, Sweetgreen. So I'd like you to look them up, look up the company and see. Well, actually, let's see if I can pull them up here again without. Okay, here we go. So Sweetgreen is a relative to the other companies we've been looking at, pretty small. It's only $1.2 billion company. It looks like they don't make money. So how are they, what are they trying, how are they staying true? What are their roots? It says it stays true to the roots. How would you describe the roots of this company? How are they using blockchain technology to increase their supply chain? What's the culture like there? Think about the stuff we've been talking about in this chapter and apply it. What's the culture at a place like Sweetgreen? And how does management keep track of everything to make sure that all the everything is being done. So take what we've talked about in this chapter and what you read in the book and apply it and see if you can see some of the themes that we talked about and that that is covered in the content in the book. Okay, that is it for chapter 7. I appreciate your attention. I hope this video was useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you in class the next time we get together. All right, have a great rest of your day.